Alright, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. I've been going through a series of video presentations that I've created based on the Rankin Technical College AWD, or Application and Website Development, and in particular the AWD 1111.NET Framework with Web Databases class for the fall 2019 semester. The textbook used for the class is Pro ASP.NET MVC 5. As you can see on your screen, it's an A-Press book by Adam Freeman. I'm into Chapter 14, and I'm down onto the bottom of page 353, creating the controller. So we just created a very simple out-of-the-box type of project in here. All right, so Visual Studio creates a home controller as part of the initial project, but I'm going to replace that code that Visual Studio has. So we're going to replace the code that's here, which again is what we get out of the box, and we're going to replace it with the code that the author has here on the bottom of page 353 and going on to page 354. Again, when this kind of stuff happens and you get an error, don't let that bother you, because we just haven't added all the code yet. Now, this is in so many ways an unbelievably simplistic example. Let's look at it anyway. All right. First of all, using system.web.mvc. The MVC is what you'd think, model view controller, that's used in many, probably most, but maybe not all, MVC applications. Our namespace, it's debugging demo. All right, don't know why we don't have a 2 in there, but we don't. So it's debugging demo.controllers, because that's where we are. Then we've got our class home controller, which is here. That class inherits from controller. Virtually every controller class that you create will inherit from controller. All right. By default, we have only an index method in here. We're creating 3 variables. An integer called first val with a value of 10, an integer called second val with a value of 5. The result has what? 10 divided by 5, in other words, it's 2. All right, so we should have viewbag.message, welcome to ASP.NET MVC, and return view. Let's do a file, save all. Let's again go down to our views, right mouse click on index, which is the equivalent of our home controller index, and let's open it up in the browser. All right. And as far as I can see, at least, it really doesn't look any different. Well, we don't have a contact, we don't have an about, so those are correct. And in our home, it's still running this, and I'm not sure why. Let's put in here home. Oh, it's still running the default, but again, I'm not exactly sure why. All right. The next section here is creating the view. Visual Studio, oh, it's running the default view, that's why. All right, also created the index. I don't need the default content, and we'll replace it with what is shown here. So let's replace it, and after we do, we'll go back and talk about it. So this right here, this ends up calling this right here. That's the stuff that we got. That's why it looked the same, even though I had changed, even though I had gone in and changed the home controller's index method, I had not changed the associated view. We will now. All right. So what are we saying? We're going to be working with integers. By default, we're not using any layout. The rest of this pretty much is just what? All this up to right here, that's straight HTML. Beginning HTML tag, ending HTML tag. Beginning head tag, ending head tag rather. Meta tag saying we want this to be responsive. Here we're adding our own CSS file, and that CSS file is in our content folder. There it is. Okay, so that's the stuff we put in there by default. Here's the title for our page. All right. Then in here, message equal view data message. Well, what the heck does that mean? That means go back here. There's where we set the view bag message. Now it's view bag there, and it's view data here, but those two work seamlessly with one another. So it should say at the top, when we run this in just a second, we should have an H2 tag, and that H2 tag, instead of message, it'll plop in welcome to ASP.NET MVC. Underneath that, return view result, which is 10 divided by 5. And we're not doing anything. It says the calculation result value is 2. Let's see if indeed that works. So again, file, always a good idea to do a save all. Close this. Go back to my views here, right mouse click on index, and choose view in browser. And it's pretty much what we mentioned. Welcome to ASP.NET MVC. The calculation result is 2. All right. Let's stop the run here. Backstop both these runs. Get ourselves back to here. And they want us next to look at the CSS file that's under our content folder. And what we're going to do is change what's in there to what is shown in the text on the bottom here of page 354 and the top of page 355. So let's grab this. All right. And then let's paste in the rest. Let's do a file save all. And then let's again right mouse click on index.cshtml and view it in the browser. All right, did it change much? Well, we got an underline now. But other than that, it doesn't look very different from the way it looked before. All right. All right, that's all fine. Let's jump into, and I'm going to close this. Visual Studio, as mentioned on page 355, prepares new projects for debugging automatically. All right, but it's useful to understand how to change the configuration. The important setting is in the web.config file of the root project folder. Web.config is the one here, not the one here. That's the one for your views. This is project wide. All right. The important thing is it can be found there. And let's put in this line if it's not there, the compilation. All right, compilation debug equal true, which is right under system.web. We've got it already. Compilation debug equal true. We even have our target framework put in there. A lot of compilation in an MVC framework project is done when you're running in IIS, which is pretty much what we're in right now. So you need to ensure that the debug attribute is set to true. All right, we're in here now because later we would probably end up moving this over to, I don't know, some kind of an actual regular server where we could put the application. Do not deploy your application to a production server. Always set that to false first. Otherwise, if you had errors, you would potentially be showing anybody who ran the program those errors. And there could be information in there that's very important. In addition to the web.config file, I want to ensure that Visual Studio includes debugging information in the class files it creates. This isn't critical, but it can cause problems if you have different debug settings and they're not in sync. Ensure that the debug configuration is selected in the toolbar. All right. You'll notice if I right mouse click on here, there is a debug toolbar. And it says debug right there. You don't want it to say release. You want it to say debug. And the other option is configuration manager. You don't want to bring that up typically either. All right. So mine is there. It says to debug an ASP.NET or an MVC framework application here, and I'm on page 356. All right. Select Start Debugging from the Visual Studio Debug menu or click on the green arrow. Pretty much what we've already done. So you can either click here, which is I'm just used to doing that, or debug. All right, you can either start with debugging or start without debugging. All right, if I click Start without debugging and I click here, the program just runs. On the other hand, had we come in and gone into our web config file, and had we set debug to false, again, you do that when you're actually running in production mode, but if I do that and then come back in here again and choose debug, start debugging, it says I can't do that. In your web config, your debugging is set to false. All right. And it says, if I click OK, fine. All right, looks like it's going to go back and start it anyway. And then let's go back in and check. Still says false. It did run though. But short story long, keep it set to true. Oh, I guess it did change it for us. All right. All right. I'm up to page 357, which is here entitled Causing the Visual Studio Debugger to Break. Good place to stop. Pick it up there in the next lesson.